Kimungo Ukombozi, Kimungo Ukombozi, Kimungo Ukombozi, divine liberty, divine liberation, divine freedom, and all that that will bring for African people wherever we happen to be on the face of this earth. Karibu, welcome. We are gathered today to honor and celebrate the great hero, the great liberator, Omowale Malcolm X. And this is an annual observance, as all of the observances are on the cultural, the spiritual and cultural calendar of the Universal Royal African Nation, otherwise referred to as URAN, URAN, Universal Royal African Nation, URAN, of course, being the acronym. And as all observances are, it is a special one, a special time of year to honor and celebrate a great hero, one of the greatest African world heroes that we've ever produced as a people. And indeed, a soul that lives on, having established, created, walked the journey of ascension during his physical lifespan, was able to continue the wisdom guiding essence by decree of the Creator to empower and to energize souls generation after generation since his passing. And that is why we're here, because he passed before I was birthed in the physical sense, but yet still somehow energy has a way of transmitting itself beyond the physical so that we become empowered. And that has been with the African since the beginning, since the earliest of times. We've walked that journey of spiritual flow. Now, I know that when I say spiritual, some people may get a little bit, well, I'm not so sure about that. But spirituality is a natural part of African life. It is a core part of African life. And rightly so, because African souls are so spirit dominant as a people. We do things in very unique ways. And we have spirit substance as well as physical substance that makes us unique. We are, in metaphysical terms, spirit dominant, and in biological or physical terms, we are melanin dominant. And likewise, there are others on the planet throughout the world that are melanin recessive and spirit recessive. So they don't behave the same ways that we do. We're not expressive in the same kind of ways, generally speaking. And this is just generalization, of course. And there's always going to be exceptions. But we are moved in a particular way. We are energized in a particular way. And certainly we don't want to lose that. Even though our spirit may be misguided, our physical cells may be misguided, misengineered, derailed, misinformed, subject to unknowingness of who and what we really are. And that's something that we ought to take account for in our restoration of what it means to be our fullest selves, because that's what we always have in our substance of being, is the fulfillment of our optimal functional selves. Yes, there are outside impositions, and we must recognize those impositions for what they are. But we have to build, and we have to restore ourselves to our maximum functionality, to fulfill our maximum potentials and our maximum capabilities in order that we can have self-determined liberty, self-determined nationhood. That is to be built. That is to be fabric and essence of African life. You see, spiritual functioning is pragmatic. Oh, I know that's going to be hard for some to hear, because we get so derailed into it being some mystical, fantastical, fictional, up in the clouds, off in the ether, or in the smoke somewhere, and in a sphere that relates not to life experience. And that's very dangerous as far as I'm concerned, because, or we are concerned, because that's pretty much escapism. That's pretty much leaving reality behind to go off somewhere else, only to feel good for a moment or two and then return to the reality of circumstance, reality of condition. So our spirituality has practical implications. It energizes what we do in our lives. And certainly that's true when it's directed and formulated and shaped in the right kind of way. We don't deny our spirit. We just direct our spirit. We don't throw it away because it's been misdirected. We harness the energy that is very much ours and direct it to our best advantage. That's self-determined, that's self-betterment, that's self-ascension. That's what the African journeys in life to realize. Omowale Malcolm X is a powerful example of spirit ascension. This is a soul that had childhood rooted in that very natural journey of African ascension, of African restoration, of African optimal functioning and optimal flourishing, missioning towards the elevation of a whole people. This is a Garveyite child. And the forces of anti-African agency realized that. So they set in motion the attacks and impositions to derail what would have been a consistent and unbroken journey. But thankfully, even though as a result of imposition and derailment, Omowale Malcolm X was hurled into dysfunction, he was able, with the help of those that were close and were deeply concerned about his well-being, to elevate, transform progressively to become the great, powerful liberator that we've all come to know. And it's that progressive transformation that I just want to share a few sentiments on for this brief time that we have together, this brief time that we can share discourse. Progressive transformation is necessary as a constant feature of African life. It's necessary. If we are at our optimal functioning, there is still progressive transformation because there is always that drive for premier or pinnacle excellence, as close to creator-like as we can become. So there is constant drive. If we are, likewise, if we are in a lowly state, then it becomes more pressing, more urgent, more imperative, paramount, that we progressively transform so that we can reach a level of normality, of more natural living, and continue that thrust onward and upward. Progressive transformation, as with all facets or features of African life, is energized in metaphysical terms. This is the spirit dominant people that we are. That's why we resonate when we have ones and ones that come among us that can deliver a message in a particular and potent way, because that rhythmic vibration touches our deepest crevices in our inner souls of self, and we are moved in particular ways. That's not a weakness, that's a strength if we can direct it in a way that lifts us to engage in life to the full, and progressively so that we can become self-determined as a whole. There's nothing wrong with that. So if progressive transformation is energized spiritually, and because spirituality for the African has practical implication, or indeed may be referred to as pragmatic spirituality. That's qualifying it. It's always been that. Then it means, therefore, that the fullest forms of physical being and physical progressive transformation can take place. Omowale Malcolm X is aligned with the deity Ogun. That's a warrior deity. It's a deity of victory, absolute. It's a deity of unconquerability. It's a deity of bringing swift, conclusive, victorious results. That's what Ogun is. But for Ogun to be a victorious deity, it has to be a deity of progressive transformation. In other words, there's a process to get from an undesirable state of being to one of desirability or fully flourishing or victory. From one state to the next, it's progressive transformation that has to take place for victory to be achieved, for unconquerability to be realized. There's somewhere that is not quite right for us and ought to be in. So we call on Ogun to get us from the undesirable state to the desirable state conclusively. That's how victory is revealed. That is how victory becomes the yield. And as it is for Ogun, which is from the West African region of Africa, in the ancient northeastern Nile Valley region, those characteristics were revealed through the deity Heru. So we have Heru, Ogun, and the example, the legacy, the living legacy of Omowale Malcolm X. There's a continual thread, a continual ongoing thrust that is age old. It's not new. It just manifests from form to form, from era to era. And we're able to have it personified in the deeds of greatness that we're able to manifest as a people. So spiritual transformation then, or progressive transformation, needs to have some formulation that works for African souls throughout the world, that is easily accessible. And certainly this year, as has been mentioned in previous lives, wherever we happen to be, in the Americas, in the islands of the so-called Caribbean, more accurately, the islands of New Africa, in the UK, in Europe, the African continent itself, wherever we happen to be, we have a oneness of living that is in harmony with cultural practice, not distinct from, not spirituality over here and cultural practice over here. There ought never be a battle between the two. All kinds of friction and dysfunction, fragmentation, all kinds of friction and dysfunction, fragmentation, distortion, confusion, debris, damage can take place as a result of that. So we want harmony at the core of our livingness. If we live cultural values, then the spirituality that we have energizes the behavioral expressions of those values, the outward expressions of those values. As an example, we can't surely have spiritual functioning that is an antithesis to cultural engagement. We can't have spiritual functioning that is anathema to cultural engagement. In African life, that's nonsensical. It means that we're culturally schizophrenic, divided every turn we make, every step we make, split. Part of us or part of our being over here and part of our beingness over there. So, Asbot then is a formulation, an accessible vehicle to harmonize, interconnect, interlace, as it normally should be, world African culture and world African spirituality. It does not negate any of the local African or regional African traditions. And if you are a practitioner of any of the localized or regional traditions, it's still something that is readily accessible to harmonize with, so that we have a shared experience at a level that everyone can access. And also, if you happen not to be a practitioner of any such existing tradition, then there is a formulation which you can engage in as a shared experience and as a principal port of call. Now, at the core of Asbot, and it's all about progressive transformation. That's what we're discussing, or at least shedding a little bit of light on, is the identification of the general levels of the self, the person self. That's the self that you walk in the shoes of. There's the self of the harmonious and complementary African male and female union. There's the self of the African family. There's the self of the African community. There's the self of the African nation and the self of the African global community at large. Each of them are selves scaled up. And if we take, for example, because there's much discussion out in the world around male and female union, that if we are energized through spiritual thrust, then surely the spiritual formulation, the spiritual fabric ought to have a vehicle for the harmonious and complementary union between the African male and the African female, the African masculine man and the feminine African woman. This is powerful. To reclaim our living selves, our functioning selves, our rightfully functioning selves in this regard. And if we are engaged in the betterment of ourselves as a whole, not because we've got challenges to face, we deny ourselves. Oh no. We don't deny ourselves because we have challenges. We embrace ourselves and face the challenges. So we don't throw away our identity, who and what we are. That's worse than throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So we embrace ourselves and then we face the challenges. And if we're calling on Ogun during this time, in light of the celebration for the life and continuing legacy of the great hero Omowale Malcolm X, the great liberator Omowale Malcolm X, then it means that there is victory to be had. There is a state of being to attain. And that must be brought to fruition to bring us from a state that is undesirable, less than desirable, however you choose to describe it, to a better state of being. So it's a process of elevation. Something has to transform. And if we take each of the levels of the person's self, the levels of the self, I should say, from the person's self, the male-female union, the family, the community, the nation, and the race at large, it means that we have the arena or the sphere of spiritual expression within which to transform, to energize ourselves with that focus in mind. And each level has its obligation to the greater good. Hope ones and ones are following. There are so many ills that we can almost overnight purge in taking that first, that primary, that initial step of self-betterment, of reclamation, of restoration. We need to throw away alien imposition by way of misogyny, and by way of misandry. They both need to go. As well as plenty of the other ills. But it's not simply a purge for its own sake. Ogun is not a warmonger for its own, for the sake of warfare, for the sake of conflict. No. It's to get from here to there. And whatever gets in the way of getting from here to there has to be faced. But that victory must be the yield. Must be the yield. Must be the result. Must be the outcome. So if at any level of the person, if at any level of the self, we're not quite there, then there is the purge, there is the calling on the wisdom guide and the energy source to engage in practical life expression in order to fulfill the best of ourselves, to reveal the best of ourselves. That's self-determined activity. It's not wallowing in the deficit of victimage. Be aware of the tricks, the traps, and the alien forces that mean the African ill. But that's not the core activity. The core activity is to get from here to here and get out of the way whatever is stopping that ascension. Alien forces and all. Hope this is making sense. The African deities, speaking of misandry and misogyny, African deities, male or female, are metaphysical African family members. That's what they are. Metaphysical African family members. African male deities do not exclusively belong or are the preserve of or are in any way unique to African men. Likewise, African female deities are not unique to the preserve of African women. African men relate to African male deities in their male way. African female deities relate to African male deities in their way, and vice versa. Rather like you have a real life family, if it were functioning in a wholesome way. An uncle means something to the African woman. An uncle means something to an African man. An aunt means something to an African woman. An aunt means something to an African man. So they're not exclusive in that way. We've got to get rid of alien thoughts that have seeped into and contaminated our minds and reclaim ourselves so that we can energize our core substance in the rightful and proper ways. And not be agents of our own, of any kind of self-destruction or denial. So I hope that makes sense to souls that are listening in. And really take heed. We've had great heroes of the ancient world that have been that have imbibed the spirit of male deities for empowerment. Likewise for the men. And in the an example of that is, for those that have studied ancient Nile Valley civilization, an example of that is the Queen Hatshepsut, who was a direct descendant of Amos the First, the great liberator. And she so imbibed the deity of Heru, she was known as the living Heru. That was one of her titles. So this is powerful. And we can embrace our family as we express familyhood. See how that works? We energize our spirit in that way so that we can make manifest in the physical optimal family flourishing, optimal family life, intonation. Don't throw away your spirit now. We've done so much that is powerful in this world because we are unique in that way, amongst other ways. So with that progressive transformation in mind, one of the ways to best celebrate Omowale Malcolm X being a great example of self-transformation and energizing African souls, organizing African souls, guiding African souls to transform themselves. The Universal Royal African Nation has named various times of year, has expressed progressive transformation by way of ensuring that the various times of year in its African cultural calendar cycle, its African spiritual cultural and calendar cycle, have both male and female deity energy forces present. And you can see this if you visit the official website, www.u-ran.org. So when we celebrate, for example, the divine essence of water flow, the deity of Yamanja, the female water divinity, and the deity of Olokun, the male divinity of water flow, are in synchronization, are in oneness of being, are in wholesomeness, just as the complementary male and female union of harmony ought to be of oneness. See how that works? But if we allow the alien impositions of misandry or misogyny to creep in, and we then see that in how we express ourselves, in calling on our divine essence, then we will automatically manifest that in our lives. If our spiritual realm is infiltrated, then it means that we automatically express that infiltration in the outward behavioral expressions that we have. That is true of what some people might refer to as feminism, which has been dire throughout the African community. So there's some food for thought, and hopefully ones and ones can walk away and digest some of those ideas, process some of those ideas, and make sense of them in your life. If you are interested in becoming a part of the Universal Royal African Nation, or wanting indeed to find out a little bit more about it, then please do visit the website. Again, it's www.u-ran.org. You can email info@u-ran.org. And there's a process of being part of it. And for ones and ones that are genuinely interested in journeying to see the restoration and the betterment and the victory of African souls, then it is highly recommended that you make contact in that regard. So I'd like to thank ones and ones for coming along, partaking of this information. Hopefully, it'll be of use so you can engage with it, learn from it, progress with it, and so on. Uh, I didn't say at the beginning, but I would like to thank the young ones present who are able to furnish us with the vibrational energy of the drum. And we'll ask them to just close us out so that we can conclude the session in the same way that the session came into being by way of rhythmic expression. So, with that, until the next time we're able to share and converse, Kimunga Ukumbozi, Kimunga Ukumbozi, Kimunga Ukumbozi, divine liberty, divine liberation, divine freedom, and all that that will bring for African people, wherever we happen to be on the face of this earth.